So I did that video, a couple videos actually, talking about freedom and different things and going back and forth, and there's still a lot of discussion going on about freedom and what is it and can we obtain it, and if it's something that we even have anymore. And it really got me thinking. I was just watching a video by buddy Chaz Shea Krita. He used to know as PD Lumina, and he was talking about what Haas was saying. I was reading a comment from Demcad that said that most people just don't care, to which and Chaz said that's not true, and he's right. He's right that there's many people who do care that we're losing freedoms even more and more. But I was looking over some of my bills, water bill, utility bill, got my car registration from California 2 days ago. I was looking at that. I was looking at the mortgage, and I started realizing that there is no freedom anymore. I mean, I guess it all depends on perspective. I guess perspective is the right way to look at it. In the eyes of, I guess, a Chinese citizen, I probably look pretty free. In the eyes of people in this country, we don't look too free. We look like we're slowly being put into bondage. I would contend, and I'll go ahead and throw it out, that we're already in bondage. We're already not free. I think we lost our freedoms many, many, many years ago. If we ever had them, we had them for a very short period of time. And it was probably when the politicians and the banks realized, wait a minute, there's money to be made, and we can get these people to pay it no matter what. And Corey touched on some of this when he started talking about paying taxes. Mike from Channel Being Fringe talked about this, about money being taken out of his pocket to pay for schools for the kids that he has none of. He has no kids. He has no problem paying taxes for roads. We understand if it's going for something that we're using, that's one thing. It's like a usury fee. You got to pay for things you want to use, right? But it's all these taxes that shackle us. All these fees, these regulations. I don't think there's any actual way to be free, short of becoming a homeless person, somebody living on the street. But even then, how free are you? I mean, people talk all the time about how free a homeless person is, where they have no schedule, no rules, they just wander, but they do have rules. I mean, if they're walking through the wrong parts of the town or the communities, the cops will show up and they'll haul them away. They will run them back to where they came from. You have homeless people who get beat to death by the police. You got to wonder about how free are you, because there's rules about where they can sleep and hang out and everything else. So I would contend that we really have no freedoms. It's all perspective. It's varying degrees of what we perceive to be freedom. But think about it. If you had no job, no need for money, if you happened to be self-sufficient, could grow your own food, say you lived you had 40 acres out in the middle of somewhere, you had solar panels, you had a windmill, you had some cattle, some pigs, plenty of room to grow vegetables and crops. You had a spring out back, you were getting water. You might think you're free, but are you? In most places, are you not still required to pay property tax? How about energy generation fees? They've been proposing that in some areas where there's lots of windmills and solar panels going up, that because it's cutting into the revenues of the public utilities, governments, whether it be county or state or federal, are looking at the possibility of starting to charge people for a fee for how much energy they generate for themselves. Because the government still has to get its money. Look at all your utility bills. There's all kinds of fees there. And they call them fees, not taxes. But it's a tax. It taxes you. It requires you to pay something for them to go to some program that you're not benefiting from. Look at your property tax bill. Look at all I mean, some states are different and probably have less, some might have more. But all the line items on the bill for all the different fees and services, vector control and water abatement and all kinds of different things that may or may not benefit me. But I have no choice. I must pay it. I can't stop paying or I get thrown out of my house. They take it, this property that's not mine, even if I paid it off, is it mine? No. Because read your mortgage note. All you're paying for is the right to occupy the space. It still technically belongs to the bank. It doesn't belong to you. It still belongs to the bank or the government. Because even if you paid it off, doesn't the government still demand that you pay tax every year? You must pay property tax, which is basically you're paying rent to live on that property. What happens if you don't pay that tax, pay that rent to the government? You go to jail. They take your property. I know where my parents live up in Northern California, they have a ranch. They have a well because they're nowhere near a city, nowhere where you're going to have running water supplied by a government agency. So they have a well. They pump their own water. And now the county wants to start charging everybody with well pump fees. They want to put a meter on every pump and start charging a small tax. Just pennies per gallon. They want to regulate how much water you pull out. Make sure that they get their money. When you pay your auto registration, I have environmental fees. I have license fees, registration fees. There's a vehicle weight fee. And that's all, supposedly to pay for the roads. I'm sorry, didn't we pass Measure M in California to pay for road repairs? We pay that for every gallon of gas we buy. Oh wait, we also pay sales tax on every gallon of gas we buy. And then there's other fees that they tack on there. It never ends. It's just one more fee, one more tax, one more regulation to shackle us to the powers that be. You can never escape it. Ever. Does that mean that we just give up? Absolutely not. Because I think that the spirit inside every one of us tells us that we must keep fighting. Isn't that the human condition? To keep fighting for what we know to be right and true? To keep fighting for something? To not just give up? I mean, that's the question I'm really thinking about. When is it enough? What is your breaking point? Or as Corey C., how big does it have to be before you do something? How bad do you have to be getting screwed before you do something? What's your pressure point? What's your pain level? What's your comfort level? At what point, when you go to the airport, is it okay? Are you fine with getting yourself groped and felt up and have hands down your pants? Have naked pictures taken of yourself? Is it when they start putting fingers and digits up inside you? Because you got to start checking for bombs. Because they might sew them up inside. That incident that just happened a day ago, 2 days ago, a woman coming from France passed a note to the airline attendant about she had something, implanted bomb inside her. Turned out there was nothing. But you know what, you realize what that probably was? That was to send the signal. Because first they had a report a few weeks ago about that this new Al-Qaeda method of how to attack America. One more instance of pumping up the fear. So what do they do next? Then they send somebody with a note, a little warning, just to really give some credence to that report. But the government says, now you have to be fearful of this. How do you stop and protect against that? You don't. You can't. But what you can do is start humiliating and degrading people even further and further and further. Because by doing that, you weaken them. You indoctrinate them. You desensitize them to what's really happening to them. And then you'll think nothing about turning over your papers every time you run across a police officer. You'll think nothing about them coming into your home and looking through your stuff and making sure you don't have too much of one thing. Making sure that you have plenty to share with your neighbors, and they'll gladly take it and hand it out to your neighbors. You won't think too much about working an extra 10 hours for the government every day. Just as long as, nobody's blowing up next to you. What's your perspective?